could call them Canada's first feminists. No, we're not talking about NAC, the National Action Committee on the Status of Women. It's another Canadian group that's been around a lot longer. The Women's Institutes is an organization for rural women, and this weekend it celebrates its 103rd anniversary. It all started in Stony Creek, Ontario, and now has millions of members in 70 countries around the world. Still, many people have no idea the group even exists. We spent a day with members of the Coningsby branch, that's a chapter near Guelph, to find out what the Women's Institutes are all about.
And now we go back, we form the core of the flower, right? Now we'll start to roll.
The very first Women's Institute meeting was held at Stony Creek on February the 19th in 1897.
Stitch it together, yes.
Adelaide Hoodless lost a child to the fact that milk was unpasteurized, and she took on the cause that she should teach women about good nutrition, and so she started a Women's Institute branch with the idea of teaching them good homemaking practices and good health.
Ring your little bell.
Ring my little bell. Okay, I'll ring my little bell. I'd like to welcome the Hillsburg Auxiliary ladies and also any other guests and Pat Salter. And we will start our meeting with the Ode and the Mary Stuart Collect.
It probably was a radical idea, yes. Some of the comments made by the men recorded in history at that time was, oh, well, let them have their meeting. They won't be able to carry on because they'll soon all be fighting and it will break up. It didn't break up.
If you belonged to Women's Institute, you were covered by this health insurance that before OHIP was in, and so all rural women wanted to belong to that, and that was when the membership was really the highest. About 35,000 members during the war, of course. They helped a lot with the war effort, with knitting and all kinds of things. So that was a big time for membership, too, because also, you know, women needed the support of each other if their husbands were away.
So it's your own creation, okay?
Oh, yes, I see how it's coming into place now.
Yes? And you see the beautiful colors at the center then?
Beautiful.
I think in the beginning, they were interested in cookery, in nutrition, and in menu planning. And from that came the spin-off on health, which then led into, well, baby clinics in rural communities, immunizations in schools, and they just branched out and looked at the community as a whole and how could they make a difference there.
We survive on our membership, which is $18.15 a year. In Ontario, we have 12,000 members in 800 branches, from Northern Ontario to Southern Ontario to east to west.
Grant that we may realize that it is the little things that create differences.
Rural women need an organization of their own because their circumstances are a little different from women who live in cities and have access to government programs, community programs there. In the country, when the Women's Institute began, those things weren't available.
You want one or two? I'll start with one, okay?
I think the sociability of the rural organization is important because, you know, your neighbor isn't right next door. You don't run next door and borrow a cup of sugar, you know, like you do in the city. And I think it was an opportunity for the neighbors to get together socially as well as share their learning experiences.
Myrtle, I need your expertise again.
A lot of times when you meet up with somebody and they say, oh, Women's Institute, what is that?
The difference between the Women's Institute and NAC and other feminist groups, and it's my personal belief, but I do believe we have been a feminist group. It's just that we've been quietly going about it, and I guess we're doers, not talkers, and so we've just gone about our work and hoping that we can make communities better, more livable, and safer for all people who are there. And we just haven't talked about it. We've been terrible public relations officers for our own organization.
was because of Women's Institute that music was taught in the schools, the same with home economics. They also campaigned for white lines on the road and stop signs on the school buses. They campaigned to have bread wrapped when there wasn't any plastic bags. If it happened, you know, there was an accident in your community, right away we banded together. How are you going to fix this? Does it need a stop sign? Does it need a traffic light? Let's get to the municipal level, and if they can't help us, we'll move above. And we still provide 4 scholarships for students at Guelph University that are in family studies.
We're looking especially at women's health. Hasn't been done until the last number of years, and the Women's Institute was one of the leaders in that. Osteoporosis, breast cancer, all cancers as they affect women, heart and stroke, which has quite a different connotation for women than for men. And another thing in which we're involved right now is working with pharmaceutical companies to give information to women in the rural communities, many of whom are shut in.
Now we'll have our roll call. What year did you join the Institute, and who invited you?
I joined in 1944, and it was Selma Gray's sister, Jean, that made me join.
Well, I joined the Coningsby Institute in 1950 when we lived on the 6th line, and Mrs. Herb Beatty was the one that invited me to join.
In 1929. Who invited you? I don't know.
Coningsby branch started up in 1905. Obviously, I wasn't here then.
We went sleigh riding on a hill on 27th Side Road at noon. You'll not believe it, but I have a picture taken about 1922 of the 17 pupils, and 15 of us are in bare feet.
The oldest member of each institute was to write a grandmother's legacy. Then we are all to do our grandmother's legacy, and there are different portions that we should include. And I was the one that said that you should put in how many monarchs you have seen, because a lot of children maybe won't see any. It would certainly be nice to be able to attract younger women, but so many younger women work. Most of our meetings are in the afternoon because some of our members don't want to drive at night. Therefore, it usually happens that as women retire, they join the Institute.
We've had about 350 new members last year over Ontario, which is, you know, it's not a great deal. But I think that we'll catch up with these people eventually when their lifestyle slows down a little bit. I feel confident that Women's Institute will go on for another 100 years.
Thursday night on Studio 2, A Night at the Opera with Michael Colvin. Michael Colvin, the rising star of Canadian opera, Thursday night on Studio 2. Heading down to Queen's Park tomorrow afternoon, where finally, 10 years later, former Premier David Peterson is having his portrait unveiled at Queen's Park. You know, every former Premier, Jerry's got to get their portrait. And I bumped into him last week. He said, "You are coming to Queen's Park for the hanging, aren't you?" And I think I knew what he meant. Anyway, we're going to have a camera down there, and we will show you. The Premier says, former Premier, that this portrait is unlike any other former Premier there. So naturally, we have to go, we have to see, and we'll have it on the air for you Friday night. That's it for us tonight. So long, everybody. Tomorrow at 8.